Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Sarah Powers with PDR, and you've probably gotten some emails from me recently. And we are going to be listening today to Kelly Bowman, who is one of our PDR principals and our business transition specialist. She's going to be talking to us about mergers and acquisitions and the impact that those have on the corporate environment. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Kelly to help her get started.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the introduction. A lot of you probably know PDR for our design work, our high-profile projects, but in fact, a lot of my experience with PDR has been around the extensive merger and acquisition and consolidation work that we have done. This experience has really inspired us to approach M&A projects differently and to increase the rate of success for our clients. As I told you, I've had a lot of experience with these mergers and acquisitions. I've been with PDR for 20 years, 10 of those years as a principal at PDR. I've done projects in over 29 countries, not over 29 countries, and have facilitated and planned and helped, in some cases, with the physical execution of over 100,000 moves during the course of my career. These experiences that I've had with my team has helped us to develop this set of tools and establish processes that really make us fast and efficient, and they bring stability to a transitioning organization during a time of high change. So I'm going to provide some insight as we go along into that transition. Here's our agenda. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the current market and why we believe this is a relevant topic for today's agenda, and what that conventional strategy and approach to M&A activity is, what the PDR approach can add to that from a people, process, and place issue. We'll wrap it up with a few key understandings, and then, as promised, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So the current market, what does the activity look like? What are the drivers? And what are some of the acquisition objectives of the acquiring organizations? This first slide illustrates for you basically the last 100 years of merger activity, and experts put them into 6 different waves, and we believe that we are seeing wave 7 occur. We'll wait to see when they start wave 7, if it happens in 2014 or 2015, but this should look fairly familiar to you if you remember your history. Wave 1 would have been those horizontal combinations, so the U.S. Steel industry. Wave 2, the vertical combinations of the U.S. automobile industry, the conglomerate era, the corporate raiders, and then in more recent times, those larger mergers in wave 5, like the Exxon Mobils and ConocoPhillips. Some of the data that I'm going to share with you today is coming from the Deloitte 2015 market reports. This report is done as a survey of over 2,500 corporate and private equity respondents. And from that survey, what we gathered in 2015, and we're waiting for their 2016 report to come out, they do expect the pace of corporate mergers to continue or even accelerate. What we saw in the first quarter of 2015 is an almost 10% jump in announced deal activity. So what were some of those headline-making deals, just to refresh your memory? In 2015, they started in, there are 3 sectors. The top 3 sectors, in fact, according to this survey, were in the technology sector, then the oil and gas or in natural resources sector, and then finally in our healthcare sector. And so, as evidenced here by those headline-making deals, many of these are still in talks and still going through regulatory approvals and those type of things. One other interesting note in this time is that the respondents also said that, well, 39% of the respondents said that they plan to tap into that M&A market to pursue divestitures. This is the shedding of their non-core assets to streamline their corporate focus. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And so as I talk about mergers and acquisitions today, keep in mind that those kind of divestment opportunities, the reorganizations that eventually come with those, that all of these same attributes and features apply even in those types of situations as well. So what are the drivers? Well, right now what we know is that corporate balance sheets, they have a lot of cash on them. The Federal Reserve is keeping our interest rates low. Our stock market, while somewhat volatile as of late, still remains fairly bullish. And our economic growth is still forecasted at a 3% rate through 2017. That's a pretty modest economic growth, but what that does is it allows companies to initiate transactions that can help position them to outpace the growth of the economy. And that is what we're looking for, is that growth. In my preparations for today, obviously I've kept up with the M&A market and have a keen interest in it, but I listened to a report from Goldman Sachs last week around the market volatility and what that is doing to merger and acquisition activity. And some of that has made it more difficult to align stocks to make the transactions work. So we're experiencing a little bit of a slowdown in the execution and even the announcement of new deals. And then specifically for our friends here in Houston, the energy and natural resources companies have not participated as of late in the M&A activity as much as we had expected. And I think there was a hope that in 2015, with the hedges rolling off, that we would see more of that activity. But the Goldman Sachs experts are speculating that now, because of the protracted downturn in the oil prices, that what we're likely to see in the oil and gas sector itself is consolidations due to bankruptcies, and that the consolidation aggregation of assets will really happen that way rather than through a traditional merger and acquisition activity. So we are going to wait to see where that goes and see if their speculations are correct. But I think what we do know is that there's activity out there. So why are companies trying to hit this merger and acquisition market? Well, the primary reason, according to the Deloitte survey, is this customer base and expansion in their current markets. Then there is the obvious geographic market expansion. We've heard a lot about China and Canada, Brazil, Mexico, India as developing markets and expansions there. And then cost synergies and scale efficiencies. What we are seeing is that a lot of companies are being bought for things like soft capital, the patents, the licenses, the market share, their name brand, their research staff, their methods, their customer base, or even their culture. Those soft capital assets are perishable and they're fragile. And so the integration of organizations together becomes extremely important. And in fact, it takes just a slightly more finesse in trying to integrate those organizations than just integrating machinery or real estate or other tangible items. Let's take a look at the conventional strategy. Here's what we know. We know that the executives want to act fast. Organizations need to act fast to consolidate their transactions. They are a lot of times very, very focused on the economics of the transaction, the political, the financial implications, but they also know that they need to get together quickly. They want to start getting those returns. We experienced this firsthand in the Exxon Mobil merger of 1999. Our teams have been preparing for several months prior to the official day one of that new organization with their transition teams. And we were strategically planning where those newly formed business units would be located. So we were taking into account all of the different options that we had available. But The reality is that when you're in a merger like that, the cascade of decisions comes down real time, and you have to be ready to act fast. So process is paramount, and being ready is paramount. We moved 7,500 people in the first 10 weeks of their new organization. And oh, by the way, I told you it was December of 1999. That means that we were all under the threat of those unknown forces of Y2K, the elusive Y2K that never really seemed to manifest itself, but certainly we had contingency plans in the middle of that, as you might imagine. So then why do 90% of respondents report that a merger or acquisition failed to meet expectations? Here's what our research says from the Deloitte survey, why the deals fall short. The two in the gray and the black, the economic forces and the market or sector forces, those are not within the control of the acquired or acquiring company. They obviously can do their due diligence, and a lot of time is spent on this, but those unknowns and those forces can cause a deal to fall short. But interestingly enough, what we found out from the 2014 survey is that these activities that are well within the control of the acquired or acquiring companies, the execution and integration gaps or not achieving those expected synergies. These are cultural items. These are systems that support the individual. And, so if the goal of an M&A is to create a new or evolved organization that will achieve better results than it could possibly do on its own, then the identities of the two organizations have to be integrated, just like the financial and technological systems that need to go together. So we believe that you have to have a really good focus on the employee and the workforce and what you're trying to achieve in your business decisions. We have a couple of poll questions. Sarah, you want to walk us through that?
Yes. So we're going to go to you all in the audience and ask you a couple of questions right now based on some of the things that Kelly just talked about. So our first question, before I pull it up, is going to be, do you agree with the speculation that merger and acquisition activity will continue to rise? So I'm going to launch that question and give you a few seconds here just to vote on it and choose your answer. And then we'll close that poll here in a few seconds and take a look at your results.
See if our experts are correct.
Okay, I'm just going to give you all a couple more seconds here. Okay, so I'm going to share the results with you, and it looks like, yes, most of you all agree that, yes, the merger and acquisition activity is going to continue to rise here in the future.
We have one more.
Yes, we've got one more question. So I'm going to launch that. In your opinion, is your company prepared for a successful merger or acquisition? So go ahead and vote on that, and I'll give you a little bit of time.
Lots of thinking.
Yep. Yep, they're coming in.
It's like watching a horse race, by the way.
Okay,
Right.
So we're going to take a look at those results. And it looks like we're a little divided. More of you said no, but quite a few of you did say yes, that you are prepared for a merger or acquisition.
That's great, Sarah, that we have so many that are prepared. I hope that what you'll learn in the rest of this session, maybe some new items that you can pay attention to. And for those of you who said no, don't worry, there's still time. So, all right, we're going to move along, and I'm going to take you through the PDR approach. And so we know these characteristics that the conventional strategy embodies, but how do we address those without running into the traps that make M&As fall short of their expectations? So again, just a refresher on the elements of an M&A. So engaging the executive leadership, their typical questions really revolve around how fast can that transaction be completed and how quickly can the returns begin. At the same time, the experience of the employees has a direct impact on the financial success by affecting the employee engagement, their productivity, their customer service, etc. What the workforce wants to know is, what is my new role? Will I be relocated? What are the changes in our compensation systems? Do I have job security? This is a time of high anxiety as all of these things start to get worked out. And so the more that we can increase clarity in the decision-making process or understanding the process rather, the better off we'll be for employee integration and engagement. We want to make sure that we're minimizing their anxiety as much as we can. Let's see. Let's go on and let's look at these upcoming slides and let's talk about what the process is. So I told you there were three things: process, people, and place, that we're going to focus on today. And three other words that you will hear me say over and over again is clarity, stability, and efficiency. So this first process piece is the portfolio planning piece. This is the process of understanding the supply and the demand of the physical integration. What are our tangible real estate assets? What does the current conditions really hold? And what are the business requirements that go along with that? And so I jokingly refer to three phases in portfolio planning to break it down into: there's the pre-planning, the planning, and the replanning. The pre-planning phases, obviously, we want to get ready for running as many scenarios as we can, getting the data together, being ready to understand who is where, what does the current organization look like, how does the organization map into the newly formed organization, what does that mean to place, what does that mean to the business requirements, what are those strategic adjacencies. We want to be able to run the scenarios that come up with the right answers, or at least the right best answer that we can come up with, and be able to deal with the different permutations of options on the fly as we go. One thing that we've learned during merger and acquisition activities is the fact that the decisions cascade. The decisions are not all made at one time. So we have to have a process that allows us to be ready for the eventual changes that come in an organizational structure, or who's going to fill a particular role, or how this thing is going to get staffed, or what happens to different kinds of organizational processes that can affect place and even their own infrastructure and workplace design as well. So, you know, we seek to understand as much as we can up front and be ready for everything else. But once we've defined those new business requirements to the best of our ability based on the decisions that have been made so far from executive leadership, then we're into figuring out, well, what does that journey look like? What is the seriatim? How do we make it happen? What's the right first move to make to be able to get things done? So we're looking for understanding that complex set of requirements and balancing it with the key milestone dates and this ability to get things done quickly. What we try to avoid as much as possible through this proactive planning and this process of clarity and efficiency and where the decisions are coming from is that we try to make sure that we understand all of the implications and the follow-ons that happen, and we try as hard as we can not to be reactive during this stage. But I can tell you that clarity in the process and who makes the decisions and where they come from is absolutely one of the most important things that comes out of this portfolio planning. So once portfolio planning is creating their solution, and by the way, this isn't a one and done type thing. This is an evergreen, evolving, delivering strategic solutions. Our migration teams are ready to catch that strategic solution and organize the physical move of people and support spaces and equipment, which, by the way, don't always go together. Sometimes people go in one direction, but their files and other things may go in a different direction. Or even the support space that may have supported a particular group now no longer supports that group. It supports a different kind of group. You know, in migration planning, the fact of the matter is that a lot of times outside of the employees' interactions with HR around, you know, their compensation packages and their benefits and things like that are changing, this is one of the first physical, tangible changes that they experience. So executing well in a migration standpoint sets a tone for your employees to say, it was either very organized and I felt well taken care of and I understand why we're doing what we're doing and we have clarity around the process and what's going to happen to me and what's going to happen next. People are not as adaptable to just relocations as we might believe, even though we're in a work anywhere kind of a mode. There's still that, you know, understanding and that satisfaction that comes from understanding where your place is every day. One of the other things that migration planning does during a merger or acquisitions is it sets these clear and consistent move rules. If you have two organizations that have two different cultural identities that come together, identifying what rules you're going to operate under is incredibly important because this is what you can broadcast and this is what people are working towards. If I have two separate set of rules for two different organizations, you can imagine the chaos that ensues and the execution team can't be nearly as efficient because they're trying to figure out who am I supposed to be listening to. The other thing that I will tell you that is important here is defining this exception process. What we know is that we can make rules all day long, but there is always the one-off. How do I deal with the one-off? Where will that exception be taken, and how will it be decided on? And are we being fair and judicious and impartial in the way that we are granting exceptions during the move process? So what's our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to make sure that employees are fully functional on day one. We want to make sure that their speed to productivity is increasing. You know, we want them to be able to work and produce and be productive and start that return on investment clock ticking right away. Those are the expectations of executive leadership. But by the way, the expectations of employees are also really high. Again, in this work anywhere world, you know, oftentimes people, and I think execution teams underestimate the value of having a really streamlined process and experience for the end user because it seems like, well, what's the big deal? You know, it can't be that hard. I just take my laptop and I show up at the next desk. But all of the things that need to support that have to be in place. I mean, these expectations are coming at us from all over. You know, I have an app on my phone that allows me to check in to my hotel when I land at the airport, choose my hotel room, set my preferences, and have the pillows on my bed that I want. You know, that's the expectation in the world that our employees are living in. So they're going to look for that same level of service. So here's an example just to talk a little bit about specifics on a merger that happened. Let's see, this merger was in 2002 and spanned over to 2003. It was a market expansion project. Neither one of these two organizations fairly equal. Neither one had a significant financial advantage over the other. But the executive leadership really was looking to leverage the strengths and assets from each of those companies. And so as a result, they too still wanted to act fast. They wanted to consolidate. They wanted to get people together, but they wanted to do it through a strategic phased approach and to be ready. They wanted to execute quickly, and they wanted to get their physical consolidation done, but they recognized that they needed to be very, very purposeful about how they did that. So looking at some of the results and some of the things that they did to do this, I know that Conoco and Phillips, separately, they both started moving and doing some internal consolidations internally to get ready for the environment that they were projecting was going to be the outcome of the merger and acquisition transaction. It included doing new real estate and building out new space. Conoco actually brought their lower 48 group from Louisiana prior to the merger completion to Houston. They got them here and got them ready, and they started looking at what are their other real estate needs. So this was, again, it was a market expansion, but it was bringing together these two organizations. They were in 4 different cities. One of the things that, you know, in this particular merger was understanding how the space was being used and who it was being used by. You remember I had said earlier that having a very, very clear understanding of how the organizations are organized today and where they are today and how they map to that new organization has a lot to do even with space. And so the space management data was really key in being able to move very quickly. So quickly, when I say quickly, all of their groups were consolidated within 4 months. The expectations that those groups had, and we worked very hard to make sure that they understood this, is that this is to get you together. In some cases, there's a step 2 and a step 3 for you. So all groups relocating to newly constructed space, if you were one of those groups affected by it, you did that within 7 months of day 1. And then the optimization of space adjacencies, space and adjacencies rather, that all happened within 10 months of the new organization. All told, we did about 4,700 moves within the first 4 months, we did 4,700 moves. Some of these folks had to move again in the 7 and 10 month period, depending. But the expectations were clear with the organizations. Not that everyone was happy, but the expectations were clear that we had a plan and we were moving towards that plan. Okay. I have one more poll question for you.
We do have another poll question, and Kelly's talked a lot about expectations and you know, individual expectations and company expectations, and she's given some examples. So the question that we want to share with you is, have you been a part of or have you dealt with a merger or acquisition that fell short of expectations? So just take a few seconds of your time to answer that question for us. No. It looks like quite a few answers are coming in all at once. Great.
Oh, horse race again, neck and neck.
Yep. Okay, I'm just going to give y'all, oh, actually we're at 100% voted. So
wonderful.
We're at a horse race. Let me share those results. So,
this is very interesting.
Yes, they were 50-50 there on the results. So it sounds like some of you, your merger acquisitions have gone well, and some have fell short of expectations. So I'll let Kelly continue on.
I'm going to move on, Sarah, to the next part, which is the importance of place. So I told you that during the portfolio planning stages that what we're trying to do is make sure that we can get everyone together. Those strategic adjacencies are probably the top #1 thing that we look at, but we have to balance everything else with regards to place. So obviously, you know, ConocoPhillips started preparing early, and they were able to identify where they would need to do some build-out activities to be able to offer the right kinds of spaces to their employees. But that's not always possible. And it's typically a phase 2 kind of activity. The phase 1 activity is get them in and get them in the space that most closely matches what they need from an offering standpoint and the types of places that they may need to do their work and the kinds of technology that they may need. We want to make sure that that they have the tools also that they need and that we have a plan for taking care of that. One of the other things that place embodies that I think that we've learned over time and that people maybe take a little bit for granted is the idea of how people engage and interact and behave in space. So we talk about that in terms of protocols and guidelines. You know, these are everything from the unwritten rules of how you'll leave your workspace, whether it's a clean desk policy or how you expect to find a workroom or a conference room when it's your turn to use that space. Even down to culture changes, you know, and if you've got two organizations that are coming together and it is absolutely accepted and understood that people can work from anywhere. They can get up from their desk and go to another place for focused individual work, that's okay, or, you know, where those places are, making sure that leaders understand what they may be seeing that is different. And so we engage from a transition team standpoint to identify what those issues are and then help to support employee readiness as they move to their new space, having those clear, concise expectations of what is there and available and what's acceptable or maybe not acceptable or what is encouraged is important in this concept of place. So sometimes place is a story that is really years in the making. And for Exxon Mobil, that was certainly the case. I told you that they, well, maybe I told you. Yeah, I did. In 1999 was the first day of business as Exxon Mobil, and the phase one of that activity was all about getting the upstream organizations located in Houston and the downstream organizations headquartered in Fairfax, and then their corporate organization and headquarters in Irving, Texas. So we got them together, and over the course of the last 15 or so years, Exxon and Mobil, they really started to become their own. They were 19 distinct businesses and spread out into 27 different locations, but they realized that they wanted to take this opportunity to do something that was really significant and unique to some extent. This idea of a consolidation of their assets. The reality is that what ended up happening in the build, the design, build, and occupancy of the ExxonMobil campus was essentially a merger of 20 different businesses into one location. So all of these things that I've told you about, the importance of place and being able to have the right kinds of place, the right kinds of tools, the right technology, encouraging the right behaviors, all of those things were part of their future vision. But we had to address, as we went along, those subcultures within each of those businesses that had functioned autonomously. We wanted the best of what they were, and we wanted to make them better. They wanted to make themselves better, as a matter of fact. So what were they looking to achieve? They were looking for that increased connectedness across all of their businesses. So now you have the upstream and the downstream organizations located in one place. Those chance encounters that encourage the collaboration, what we have been terming collisions, the idea that employees have what they need and they've got easy access to their colleagues and the tools to do their job. So again, sometimes place is a story in the making, and it comes along over time. So our final, and certainly not our least significant area that we want to focus on is people. And we want to take the time to invest in understanding of the vision and the expectations of the changed organization. we really need to bring clarity and stability and efficiency. And so where we focus our time at PDR is understanding how all of these things are changing, and when a place or a relocation effort happens, what is the expectation of the individual, and what are all of the forces at play? And so what we have learned to do through consolidations and reorgs and mergers and acquisitions is to work very closely with the HR groups who are driving a lot of change, or supporting, rather, the drivers for the change in the organizational structure, as well as the place-related issues from the execution side. So clarity. It is really important that we have clarity of communications and vision and process and market. These are all things that will be addressed by the key stakeholders. But from a communication standpoint, we want to minimize that anxiety and promote engagement. We want to ready employees as best we can for that day one in a new location. And so what we can do to help that is help them understand what the process is and how long it will take and exactly what they can expect over time. And a lot of times we pair this up with what's expected of them as well to have a successful transition or move, and where are the tools that they need to do the work that they need to do. So the second attribute, stability, again, they want to know, what will this new culture be? What will it be like? As much as we can help them understand and create that stable baseline so that there's not chaos on day one, or this trying to figure it out as they go along, we want to take away some of that disruption as much as we can and work with leadership to identify the kinds of intentional cultural things that we can put in place right off the bat. Leadership is really important in this stage of the game, and it's probably one of the hardest to get because everything's changing, including leadership. And so having a clear executive stakeholder leadership roadmap from a change management standpoint is crucial. So efficiency. Obviously, we want to get our talent together as quickly as possible. We want to make decisions as quickly as possible. We want to have quick response time. We want to pay attention to what our existing resources are. From a cost standpoint, we want to make sure that we are utilizing the tools for the people who need to use the tools in the right space for the right people as much as we can. And certainly we want to have focus. Focus on what our goals are, what our clear expectations are, what the role clarity is throughout the process so that they understand what's expected of them. So another example for you. This is one that I think most of us are familiar with and has been recently in the newspapers because there's been an open letter from their new CEO. There's been some write-ups in Bloomberg Business Week about United's quest to be less awful. But these were two organizations that came together, and there were high expectations of what this could mean for the market and what this could mean for customers. And, United Airlines having the advanced software systems and Continental having that customer service approach that was pleasing to customers. Those were the two things they were really looking to leverage and get them integrated in such a way that they could really be successful. But what ended up happening, I think most of us are familiar with, is that the exact opposite happened. And a large part of this, according to different write-ups and people who understand what has happened on the inside, is really about corporate identity and the buy-in of the brand. These were two very entrenched organizations with high employee loyalty. And oh, by the way, high customer loyalty as well from both organizations. So when they came together and there was a lack of vision to understand who they would be together, then everyone was confused, and lots of things happened as a result of that. We're watching United still years later, past their merger, try to overcome these issues that started from the very beginning of trying to bring these two cultures together. So I've stayed on good time, Sarah, right? Yes, I'm doing okay. So just in closing, we are almost done here. Again, we believe that you need to think holistically and strategically about every decision that you make. Having those processes in place are what will promote clarity and provide stability and increase efficiency. And we all for the stated goal of accelerating the returns and getting the returns that are expected of the merger. Again, that physical integration process, it is a colossal puzzle of moving pieces. So the early identification of all of the factors that go into it, whether it's the real estate terms or the business pressure or the culture or the workplace changes that need to happen, helping to inform those specific questions proactively will help you have stability during what feels like a really uncertain time, laying that future foundation for the new organization in a roadmap that people can understand and hopefully agree with, establishing and communicating clear and defined, consistent move rules helps us with employee buy-in, and trust. When you're honest and you're open with your communications processes and people feel like they are a part of it, or at least they can understand it, then it helps things go smoother along the way. So speed and execution as a product of our efforts is really important. We want to be speedy. We want to execute as quickly as possible, but we don't want to do that at the sacrifice of the M&A activities and the things that can make things go wrong. We want to take care of each part, people, process, and place along the way. So what are our key understandings? We should look beyond those accounting and financial benefits to make sure that we are taking care of the process, place, and people factors that are critical. Leadership should have a clear decision-making process that establishes early what decisions should be made to maintain clarity, efficiency, and stability within both organizations. That open communication and employee engagement that drives performance. And then certainly providing as much transparency into the process as you can, that will help reduce resistance and positively influence employee response. And amazingly, I am right where I should be at this time for Q&A. So I hope over the course of the webinar you've been sending in your questions. Sarah, do we have one or two questions that we can answer?
We've had some come in. So one of the first questions we got was, how fast can these activities happen? What if I only have 6 months to physically bring my organizations together?
Oh, that's a great question. So I will tell you that you absolutely can move very quickly. It is possible to do that. One of the things that I encourage people who believe their organizations may be poised for some kind of reorganization, merger, acquisition, consolidation, whatever it might be, is to start to get your own data in order. Figure out what you have at your fingertips. Start to understand what your protocols and your decision-making paths, what those actually start to look like. Because as soon as you can start to identify them and get them ready to go with the new organization that is coming in, if you have processes and tools ready to go, you can move very quickly. Preparation is key.
Okay, great. The next question that came in, it was really focused on the people side of things. So what are the top people issues you experienced during this extensive process, and how do you address them?
Another good question. So from from the people side, I've told you that they are worried about so many things. They're worried about job security and role changes and compensation and do I have a job? What are the benefits packages? The last thing that they are typically worried about is, where am I going to work? Will I have an office? Will I have the tools that I need? Is that going to change? And so the people issue that we deal with most often is satisfying what they need and hopefully putting them at ease that it's taken care of and what they need is going to be provided. I think that transparency in the process and helping people understand is one of the biggest things that we do from a people issue standpoint. Again, we work with HR and real estate and facilities groups really closely to understand what are the dynamics with different organizations. Also, there are times when you're in a merger or acquisition that you need to move a group who hasn't yet been notified as to whether or not they have new jobs. They haven't been offered yet, and so you have to expect and be prepared for employee resistance because their whole life is in the balance of their career being in this unknown state. So those are the things that we work with and try to make sure that we're sensitive to.
Okay. We have a couple more that have come in.
Okay, can you read the question?
Can you give us a recent low-cost M&A success?
Recent low-cost M&A success. I have to think about that. I may have to do a little bit more of my homework on this.
Okay. Another one that came in was, at what point during the M&A process should we engage a firm like PDR?
Oh, as soon as possible, right away. Again, Sarah, the preparation phase is so crucial, being ready to go. We are at such a greater advantage in today's world with our CAFM systems and our BIM systems, and we understand occupancy so much better. So many organizations are so much more sophisticated in understanding what their occupancy and utilization rates are in their workplace, and getting that information and vetting it as quickly as possible is like the first step. It's one of the first things that you do, so right away.
Okay.
Okay.
The next one is, can you share a white paper on the details of your process?
Absolutely. In fact, I think at the end of this webinar, there is a survey, is that right?
Yes.
And there's an opportunity for you to tell us whether you'd like more information, and we can certainly include that and get that to you. In fact, let me just go ahead and put this up here. For more information, my name is Kelly Bowman. My email address is kbowman@pdrcorp.com. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about your experiences. Quite frankly, 45 minutes is just not enough to talk about all the things I'd like to talk about.
I think that's all we've gotten on the question. So if you asked us about the recent low-cost success, we'll have Kelly touch base back with you about that question.
Yes, good question.
But I think that's all we've had for now. So yes, please contact us and please fill out the survey at the end because we would love to hear from you. And then I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh, yes.
Talk about that.
You're seeing a few upcoming speaking engagements on your screen. Myself and Amy Becker will be speaking at the Gulf Coast Symposium on HR issues in May, and our colleague Jill Duncan will be speaking as a panelist at the Work Design Magazine talk also in May. So look at our website for more information on both of those speaking engagements if you're interested. Otherwise, feel free to connect with me directly. I'd love to hear from you again. So thank you so much for attending. I appreciate your patience and your engagement in the poll questions and in the questions that you provided to me. And we look forward to connecting with all of you soon.